Good evening. My name is Jennifer Drown, and today I will be discussing the post-traumatic growth in adolescent survivors of school shootings. We're going to explore the prevalence of school shootings, look at the adolescents, how the impact of the school shooting has on them, the journey to post-traumatic growth, factors that strengthen post-traumatic growth, challenges and obstacles that may hinder post-traumatic growth. We're going to look at the biblical integration and possible future research that needs to be completed. So since 1999, Columbine high school shooting, school shootings have become increasingly prevalent in the United States with over 249 incidences, resulting in 147 deaths, according to Rosen Slater ETAL 2020. Since 2023 alone, there's been 135 shootings occurred on school property. And despite the media and public focus on the fatalities and the perpetrators, the long-term experience of the survivor remain unexplored. This oversight is significant given that an estimated 180,000 students have been directly exposed to fatal school shootings during school hours in the last 2 decades since Columbine, according to Levine and McKnight 2024. In the aftermath of school shootings, public discourse and media coverage often emphasizes prevention strategies, such as gun control, school security measures, and anti-bullying policies, as well as the motives of the shooter and the immediate toll it had on the victim. While these aspects are important, far less attention is given to the long-term recovery of the survivor. The personal stories of those who must live with the trauma, how they cope, rebuild their lives, and even experience post-traumatic growth are frequently things that are overlooked. This lack of focus creates a gap in understanding the full human costs of these tragedies and the ongoing support survivors need. Although school shootings in the United States have a deeply negative emotional and psychological impact on the adolescent survivor, post-traumatic growth remains a real and attainable outcome with proper support, reflection, and healing opportunities are in place. Trauma experienced during childhood and adolescence can be especially harmful as it coincides with a critical period of brain development when emotional regulation and cognitive processing systems are still maturing. Simile ETAL 2021 reviewed how trauma experienced during childhood and adolescence can severely impact development, noting that school-age youth are particularly vulnerable as exposure to traumatic experience during these formative years can significantly disrupt the development of healthy coping mechanisms, leading to increased vulnerability to mental health challenges later in life. Mass shootings have a profound and lasting mental health consequence for the adolescent, impacting not only direct survivors, but also those indirectly exposed through their communities or the media. Research indicates that exposure to this type of violence can be more psychologically damaging than many natural or human disasters. Alexander 2022 discussed how such trauma often results in serious mental health challenges, including post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, increased aggression, externalizing behaviors, and attention deficit disorder. These conditions can significantly disrupt emotional development, impair social relationships, and create long-term social, occupational, and economic burdens on both the individuals and their families, positioning mass shootings as a critical public health concern. Following a mass shooting, adolescents may experience a range of trauma-related symptoms, including intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, sleep disturbances such as nightmares or insomnia. They have a heightened arousal response like hypervigilance. These symptoms can be exacerbated by factors such as proximity to the victim, difficulty reaching loved ones during or after the event, or any pre-existing psychological distress. The severity of these symptoms can vary widely, and for some, recovery and a return to baseline functioning may take months, maybe even years. So the journey to post-traumatic growth. So the initial crisis of the school shootings, it strikes a very foundation of a young person's belief system, violating the assumptions about their personal safety, the predictability of life, and trust in others. For many, the trauma severely challenged their worldview and personal schemas, such as the belief that the world is safe or bad things don't happen at schools. These beliefs, which once guided how they understood their place in the world, are just thrown into question. In the aftermath, survivors experience trauma-related distress and intrusive thoughts. These mental disruptions signal the start of deep cognitive engagement with discrepancies between pre-trauma schemas and the new painful reality. For example, a student who previously felt invulnerable may now live with the constant fear that something horrible is going to be happening to them. This mental clash activates intense reflection and emotional turmoil, which is necessary for transformation, meaning making. As the involuntary reactivity, the panic, the hypervigilance begins to subside, survivors gradually become more capable of deliberate reflection on how their worldview has been altered. They start to re-examine their prior assumptions and search for new meaning about life, relationships, and identity. This is a pivotal step in post-traumatic growth where survivors might ask, what does this mean for my future? And what kind of person do I want to become because of this? How do I find my purpose? Integration of experiences through support, reflection, and perhaps therapeutic intervention, survivors start developing new schemas, more flexible and reality-based frameworks that allow them to reorient their identity and worldview. These new schemas may acknowledge vulnerability and suffering, but also emphasize resilience, gratitude, and a deeper interpersonal connection. The development of a new narrative. So ultimately, post-traumatic growth is marked by the emergence of a new life narrative, one that integrates the traumatic experience into a broader understanding of the self and the world. Survivors may now see themselves as stronger, more compassionate, more spiritually grounded. This narrative doesn't erase the trauma, but it reflects growth because of the trauma and the psychological work it demanded. Where to start? So following the school shooting, it's essential to first assess the needs of those affected before guiding them toward reshaping the worldview in light of the trauma. This process begins by acknowledging that their previous assumption may no longer hold true, allowing space for reflection, exploration of new perspectives, and adoption of alternative ways of thinking and being. As individuals gain greater control over involuntary reactions to intrusive thoughts, they become more capable of consciously examining the discrepancies between their traumatic experience and their prior beliefs. This reflective process opens the door to constructing new meaning, which fosters the potential for post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth can lead to profound changes in one's values, behaviors, including strengthened personal resilience, altered life priorities, reduced materialism, enhanced relationships, a deeper appreciation for life, and increased spiritual awareness. So some factors that strengthen post-traumatic growth, there's some key factors here that support post-traumatic growth include strong social connection, access to mental health, or spirituality as a source of meaning, and participation in meaningful activities. Each of these elements helps promote resilience, provide purpose, and creative pathways for healing after the trauma. So let's look at these one by one. So social support. So social support plays a critical role in the mental health outcomes of mass shooting survivors and is one of the strongest predictors of reduced trauma-related symptoms, including PTSD. Its presence serves as a protective factor that can only help prevent the development of serious psychological issues, but also lessen their severity and duration if they do occur. Positive social support is closely linked with greater resilience, enhanced coping mechanisms, and a stronger likelihood of post-traumatic growth, enabling survivors to better manage their trauma and foster long-term recovery. Social support may come from family, friends, groups, school staff, spiritual leaders, and trusted adults in their life. Second responders. So second responders play a vital role in addressing the emotional and psychological interpersonal needs of the individual affected by the traumatic event. Unlike first responders who manage immediate physical safety, second responders are more social workers and counselors. They focus on the long-term recovery. Their support may involve connecting individuals with essential resources like, counseling and support groups. These professionals provide both short-term relief and long-term interventions with the overarching goal of helping survivors rebuild their lives and process trauma in a very healthy and constructive way. Groups are great. So traditional support networks like family and friends may not always be equipped to meet the complex emotional needs of these survivors. Many survivors hesitate to share their experience with loved ones, fearing they might cause additional distress or be met with misunderstanding or invalidation. Cowden ETAL 2022 highlighted this challenge by reviewing studies, including interviews with Columbine survivors, which revealed that the most impactful support often came from their peers who have lived through the same trauma. Fellow survivors can offer a level of empathetic understanding that others simply can't, which is helping to reduce that isolation and foster a sense of belonging. And groups may provide that for the family, for the survivor. So experiential group therapies, they offer a distinctive approach compared to the traditional trauma-focused treatment. Instead of primarily relying on verbal processing, these therapies focus on the here and now, relational experience to facilitate emotional regulation, the integration of self, and the development of new healing meanings. Techniques like psychodrama, role-playing, and imagery help participants connect with their emotions and perceptions, a vital aspect for trauma survivors, especially given the role of emotion regulation, difficulties, and experiential avoidance as risk factors for post-trauma psychological disorder. Galen 2017, the group format of these therapies allows survivors to directly confront challenges such as survivor's guilt and feelings of isolation by engaging with others who share similar traumatic experiences and providing a sense of mutual support and understanding. So intensive groups therapy, there's a research by Cowden ETAL that highlighted the limitations of short-term stabilization strategies in trauma recovery and emphasized a potential of a 6-week intensive group therapy to promote Long-term healing. A recent study that he adapted a residential treatment model previously effective with veterans, individuals with mood disorders, and others to support mass shooting survivors. This experimental group approach was designed to reduce psychological distress, enhance physical health, and improve overall well-being. Participants showed significant improvements in post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, sleep, and general health, with many maintaining gains up to 6 months post-treatment. These findings underscore the promise of group-based interventions in fostering post-traumatic recovery and post-traumatic growth. In the aftermath of school shootings, many survivors may seek more private, internal paths to healing rather than public expression of transformation. However, community support plays a vital role in fostering post-traumatic growth. As Lund ETA discussed, initiatives like Hokies United at Virginia Tech illustrate how collective efforts rooted in compassion, student leadership, and shared purpose can create environments where growth becomes possible. These efforts not only helped individuals cope, but also encouraged a stronger sense of belonging and civic engagement, reflecting both personal and relational dimensions of post-traumatic growth. Importantly, Lund ETAL emphasized that while these outcomes often emerge organically, their success also reveals the value of intentional, structured approaches to cultivating growth after trauma. By combining community-driven initiatives with purposeful strategies, we can create supportive conditions that help survivors move from coping toward meaningful transformations. Most recent studies highlight the important role of post-tragedy activities in fostering growth. For example, survivors who felt uplifted by others' compassionate actions were more likely to support others and experience greater post-traumatic growth, suggesting that meaning-making, increased agency, and restored faith in humanity are critical in recovery. This can be explored through community events such as memorials, advocacy rallies, and remembrance activities to help survivors process grief and build social connection. Further supporting growth, core belief disruptions remains a strong predictor of post-traumatic growth, as survivors are often forced to reevaluate fundamental assumptions about life following tragedy. Importantly, engaging in taking action type of activities like participating in fundraisers and rallies was particularly associated with greater post-traumatic growth, suggesting that active coping and agency are powerful pathways to healing after mass violence, such as a school shooting. Jamarlilo and Felix, 2021. Websnick ETAL 2020 completed a study looking at how proximity and rumination impact post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth. They discuss how rumination plays a significant role in transmitting the effects of trauma proximity to both post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth by influencing how individuals process the trauma, details, and what the trauma means. Intrusive rumination is positively linked to post-traumatic stress, while deliberate rumination is associated with post-traumatic growth. These types of rumination demonstrate distinct relationships based on trauma proximity, with emotional proximity being tied to post-traumatic growth through deliberate rumination, and physical proximity linked to post-traumatic stress through intrusive ruminations. The findings expanded on existing literature by showing that deliberate rumination fosters post-traumatic growth, but only when emotional proximity is high, indicating that greater emotional involvement with traumatic events increases the likelihood of post-traumatic personal growth. On the other hand, physical proximity, even without directly witnessing of the traumas related to post-traumatic stress, as demonstrated in the case of individuals involved in a campus lockdown during a school shooting. Although the study did not find intrusive rumination to mediate the relationship between emotional proximity and post-traumatic stress. Existing literature supports the idea that closer physical proximity to the trauma generally increases post-traumatic stress. Importantly, this research highlights that physical and emotional proximity to trauma may uniquely influence trauma responses, underlining the need to consider both forms of proximity in the context of post-traumatic growth. Faith. Faith is increasingly recognized as a powerful coping mechanism and source of healing. It has been shown to act as both a protective factor against violence and a means of processing trauma and grief. This type of coping plays a crucial role in how individuals interpret and recover from trauma, which influences psychological resilience and spiritual transformation. Survivors may draw on their relationship with a higher power, cultural values, or religious practices to find meaning in tragedy, reframe their experiences, and restore a sense of purpose. Alexander 2020 emphasized this area as he discussed the survivors of the 2018 Santa Fe high school shooting. He frequently cited prayer and spiritual belief as essential tools for emotional recovery. Faith can help individuals make sense of shattered assumptions about the world, good and evil, and their own identity, thereby fostering both psychological and spiritual growth in the aftermath of violence. Mental health treatment. When addressing the mental health needs of adolescents after trauma, it's essential that interventions are developmentally appropriate. This means tailoring support to their age, cognitive abilities, and emotional maturity. The primary goals of these interventions are to address grief in a way that feels safe and accessible, often through storytelling, art, or play for younger children, and open dialogue for teens. Additionally, the clinician would need to promote both psychological and physical safety by creating stable, predictable environments where the survivor feels protected. Enhancing social support is critical as well, as recovery is more successful when peers, caregivers, and educators are actively involved. Finally, instilling hope is a key goal, helping young people see that healing is possible and that they are not alone, and that their future holds promise can have a profound impact on their ability to recover and grow from the trauma. Somali ETAL 2021 recommends a multi-tier treatment approach for addressing the psychological impact of mass shootings. At the first level, universal interventions such as psychological first aid, psychoeducation, and skills for psychological recovery are provided to all the individuals, regardless of the risk. For those that are a higher risk of adverse reactions, more intensive group-based interventions like art therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma are recommended. At the most specialized level, individualized treatments are necessary for those most severely affected. A step care model which matches individuals with the appropriate level of care and escalates treatment when necessary ensures efficient use of resources and personalized support. Key considerations include parental involvement, the child's starting point, provider training, and careful monitoring of the progress. Evidence-based therapies. There's several evidence-based therapies. Trauma-focused therapy, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, most likely supported for treating PTSD in youth. It includes psychoeducation, relaxation exercises, trauma narration, and cognitive restructuring. It involves caregivers to support healing process. Then there's EMDR. It reduces trauma symptoms by helping the brain reprocess distressing memories. It uses bilateral stimulation, an example, eye movements, especially helpful when verbalizing trauma is difficult for the survivor. Then there's exposure therapy. that's been adapted for adolescents. It involves repeated controlled exposure to trauma memories or reminders, reduces the avoidance and desensitizes emotional distress. There's play therapy for younger adolescents. It uses play as a medium of expression and processing trauma. It builds safety and trust, especially when verbal communication is limited. Then there's art therapy. Art therapy encourages expression of emotions through drawing, painting, or other creative media. It's useful for processing complex trauma and internal conflict. There's narrative therapy. It helps adolescents construct a coherent narrative of their life, integrating the traumatic event, particularly effective in multi-trauma situations. And then there's group experiential therapies, offers peer support, shared healing experiences, targets emotion regulation and trauma integration in safe, structured group setting. So let's look at that STEP care model. It's a framework that guides mental health professionals in delivering care that is both efficient and tailored to individuals' needs. It begins by matching the individual, such as the adolescent, with the least intensive yet still effective level of intervention based on their current functioning and symptom severity. Treatment is escalated only if necessary, ensuring that resources are used efficiently and that care remains responsive and personalized. Some key considerations is implementing this model include actively involving the parents or the caregiver in the treatment process, assessing the child's starting point holistically, and ensuring that providers are adequately trained for each level of care. Continuous monitoring of progress is also essential to determine whether adjustments or more intensive interventions are needed over time. Transformative learning. So transformative learning provides a useful lens for understanding how individuals can experience growth following trauma. When a traumatic event shatters a person's assumptions worldview, it often prompts a deep internal process of questioning long-held beliefs. This process unfolds through three phases: questioning, exploring, and experimenting. In the questioning phase, individuals begin to critically examine their pre-trauma perspectives. During the exploring phase, they consider alternative meanings and worldviews. And finally, in the experimenting phase, they test out new beliefs and behaviors that align with their changed understanding of the world. This reflective journey helps individuals rebuild a sense of identity and purpose, laying the groundwork for post-traumatic growth. Educators can play a key role in promoting post-traumatic growth by incorporating principles of transformative learning into their practice. Unlike traditional education models that focus primarily on content mastery, transformational learning emphasizes personal insight, critical reflection, and the reshaping of core beliefs. These elements are essential for helping trauma survivors find meaning in their experiences and develop more adaptive worldviews. By creating supportive learning environments that foster dialogue, encourage self-reflection, and validate diverse perspectives, educators can guide adolescents and adults through transformative processes that enhance resilience, self-awareness, and emotional recovery. Some additional things can support post-traumatic growth is that, the emotional support. It plays a vital role in how well adolescents navigate and recover from traumatic events. And animals can offer that uniquely. They're non-judgmental. It's a non-judgmental form of support that is especially valuable in this context. Due to the stigma around mental health, many adolescents may avoid seeking professional help, but the presence of animals in the therapeutic setting can increase their willingness to engage. Research has shown that animal-assisted therapy leads to higher retention and attendance among adolescents compared to the traditional mental health treatments. Given the high dropout rates often seen in trauma-focused care, incorporating animal-assisted interventions in the crisis response can be a powerful tool to enhance adolescent participation in the healing process after crisis. Exercise. Research suggests that exercise can play a significant role in promoting post-traumatic growth by influencing multiple pathways: biological, psychological, social, behavioral. Physical activity has been found to support individuals recovering from traumatic events by enhancing emotional well-being, reducing distress, and improving self-esteem and physical function. Additionally, it can foster a sense of belonging and community. While encouraging positive emotions and resilience, these outcomes create a supportive environment for survivors to reconstruct their identities and worldview, thus facilitating the post-traumatic growth process. So post-traumatic growth can be seen in 6 different areas of the survivor's life once it's achieved. The survivor will have a sense of personal strengths. They often come to recognize their inner resilience they didn't know they had. They gain confidence in their ability to handle future challenges. They have a greater appreciation for life. Many individuals report a deeper gratitude for life's simple pleasures and a shift in priorities toward what truly matters. They rebuild of relationships and enjoy activities, and they can lead to improved, the post-traumatic growth will lead to these improved relationships along with rediscovery of joy in what they what they have lost. Greater self-understanding through processing trauma. Individuals often gain a clearer sense of identity and personal values. Spiritual development. For some, trauma prompts spiritual exploration or a strengthened belief system, offering comfort, meaning, or a new sense of hope. And opening a new life of possibility. Post-traumatic growth can inspire changes in directions such as new goals, careers, or life paths that reflect the growth and lessons learned through adversity. So what are some challenges and obstacles that may hinder post-traumatic growth? There's several factors that can hinder post-traumatic growth, including a lack of supportive relationships, untreated mental health conditions, delays in receiving care, while negative media coverage and physical injuries may intensify trauma and complicate the healing process. Let's look at these one by one. So the lack of social support. As discussed in prior slides, social support plays a critical role in facilitating post-traumatic growth. Without strong supportive connections, individuals may struggle to process the trauma they're experiencing and are more likely to withdraw or isolate themselves. Research consistently shows that people with higher levels of perceived social support are significantly more likely to experience post-traumatic growth, making it a key factor for recovery process. Conversely, the absence of support or worse, exposure to negative or dismissive social interactions can greatly increase the risk of prolonged or chronic trauma responses. Media. The media holds considerable amount of power in shaping how the public perceives traumatic events, particularly school shootings. When such tragedies occur, media coverage tends to be intense and emotionally charged, often focusing on the innocent lives that were lost. This emphasis can evoke strong emotional reactions and contribute to the formation of a culture of fear and grief. Furthermore, the rapid spread of information sometimes is inaccurate or incomplete and can reinforce harmful stereotypes or create misleading narratives about the cause and consequences of the event. As a result, media portrayals can significantly influence how society interprets these incidences and how individuals respond emotionally to them. Beyond shaping perception, media coverage can directly affect the mental health of the individual exposed to it. The combination of widespread news, reports, rumors, and implementation of heightened security measures in the school often amplifies public anxiety. These elements contribute to a persistent sense of danger and unpredictability, which can intensify symptoms of post-traumatic stress, especially for those closely connected to the event. Wozniak 2020. Additionally, when the media portrays the perpetrator as a victim or seeks to rationalize their behavior, it can shift focus away from actual victims and survivors. This not only distorts the narrative, but can also complicate the emotional recovery and a sense of justice for those directly affected by the trauma, which may impede post-traumatic growth. Timing of mental health. So overall, the research found that there was a lack of communication between mental health agencies, resulting in fragmented support. As different organizations and services providers fail to coordinate their efforts, this fragmentation is compounded by the need for more centralized and individual services, as survivors require tailored care that addresses their specific needs. Additionally, many survivors face insufficient guidance on how to access, utilize, and continue receiving services, which can impede their progress towards recovery. In the immediate aftermath of the trauma, there's often a disproportionate focus on those who are physically injured, while individuals experiencing psychological trauma may not receive timely care. Studies also show that psychological support is delayed by days, preventing early intervention and potentially hindering the recovery process for those affected by the trauma. And physical injury. Survivors who endure physical harm often face ongoing medical treatment, chronic pain, or reduced physical capabilities, which may serve as constant reminders of the traumatic event. Additionally, these physical challenges can intensify emotional distress, making it difficult for individuals to engage in the cognitive and emotional processing necessary for post-traumatic growth. Furthermore, physical limitations may restrict opportunities for engaging in activities known to promote resilience, such as exercise or socializing, thereby hindering recovery. In some cases, the loss of bodily autonomy or function can have a profound impact on one's sense of identity, worldview, and future outlook. This disruption makes it more challenging to reframe the trauma in a way that encourages growth. Additionally, survivors who experience physical injury following traumatic events may also report higher levels of post-traumatic stress and somatic symptoms, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the incident, such as a school shooting. These symptoms further complicate the recovery process and delay the ability to process trauma in the way that's going to promote healing and growth. Signs to be aware of. Many school shooting survivors endure the healing process in isolation, increasing their vulnerability to mental health challenges and maladaptive behaviors. This sense of isolation is often exacerbated by inadequate long-term trauma responses. As Alexander 2020 notes, the tragic occurrence of multiple suicides among survivors within a single week underscores the enduring nature of trauma well beyond the initial event. Key warning signs that a survivor may be struggling include isolation and avoidance, which often emerge when individuals are overwhelmed or trying to shield themselves from reminders of the trauma. Trouble sleeping, irritability, and difficulty concentrating are also common stress responses that can disrupt daily life. In some cases, there's risk-taking behaviors may develop as an attempt to cope with emotional pain or regain a sense of control. Identifying these signs early is essential, as they may indicate the need for professional mental health support to aid in the recovery and prevent further harm. The biblical integration. So biblical scholars have increasingly begun to analyze scripture through a trauma-informed lens, uncovering early depictions of trauma and post-traumatic growth within sacred texts. They note the Bible is largely rooted in national trauma, particularly in the fall of Jerusalem in 587 BC, whereas the New Testament is framed by the personal and communal trauma surrounding the death of Jesus. These varying backgrounds reveal how sacred texts both reflect and respond to the psychological aftermath of individual and collective suffering, providing a framework that resonates with modern understanding of trauma and healing, leading to post-traumatic growth. One such example of this is the story of Jacob and Joseph. In Genesis 37, 31 through 35, Jacob is deceived into believing his beloved son Joseph has been killed, leading to a prolonged period of mourning and psychological despair that many scholars interpret as early depictions of chronic PTSD. His emotional response of tearing his clothes, refusing comfort, and saying he will go to the grave mourning reflects an intense unresolved grief. This trauma narrative remains unresolved until Genesis 45, 25 through 28, when Jacob learns Joseph is alive. The text states that Jacob's spirit revived, a moment that signifies emotional renewal and hope, and which can be interpreted as a shift towards post-traumatic growth, a transformation sparked by meaning-making and relational restoration. In times of trauma, the Bible offers a clear framework for navigating pain and loss and recovery. Through its narratives and poetry, Scripture provides models of individuals and communities who endured deep suffering yet emerged transformed. Survivors today may find solace in these stories, drawing strength from the knowledge that others have faced profound tragedy and through faith, reflection, and support experienced healing, transformation, and post-traumatic growth. The Bible does not avoid the realities of trauma. It acknowledges them and points towards restoration. Romans 5, 3 through 5. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Wow. Future research. So some future research ideas. First one is understanding the long-term impacts of school shootings across a lifetime. Focusing on the long-term mental health impacts of school shootings emerged as a critical issue for many participants. They consequently reported enduring psychological challenges that extend far beyond the immediate and aftermath of the event. Recovery from school shootings is often non-linear, marked by periods of progress and setbacks. This emphasizes the need to expand on outcome measures to include both mental health impact of school shootings and the downstream effects, such as adverse academic or financial outcomes, and to better capture a full range of the challenges the survivors face during the recovery and offering a clear picture of how they can be helped. Additionally, there's differences in cultural approaches. The cultural factor plays a significant role in how an individual processes trauma and experience post-traumatic growth. And research should explore how different cultural groups approach the recovery and coping mechanisms and meaning making that can contribute to post-traumatic growth. Effectiveness of early intervention programs. Research is needed to determine the most effective types of early intervention following a trauma, particularly for preventing the onset of post-traumatic stress disorder and other long-term mental health issues. And then the impact of the economic and social disparities on the trauma recovery. Further research is required to explore how socioeconomic status, race, and access to resources influence recovery outcomes. Individuals from marginalized communities may face additional barriers to recovery, and understand these factors can help create a more equitable trauma treatment and support system. And then differences in post-traumatic growth between victims and witnesses. Research should focus on the difference between different experiences of survivors who were directly and indirectly impacted by the school shootings, exploring whether survivors and the witnesses experience post-traumatic growth differently and could help develop more personalized treatment plans for those individuals. And the last few slides are my references. I don't know if you want to pause the video so you can look through them, each one. And I just would like to thank you for sitting through my presentation on post-traumatic growth in school shootings. And I look forward to watching some of yours. I hope you have a good rest of your day.